And you are live. Yes.
Oh, I'm live in front of everyone. Okay. Um, right. One moment. Yep. All right. So,
And you are live.
used.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh,
Getting used to how
I'm
this is
live.
being done.
Everyone.
All right. So here we go. Well, just want to check is everyone can hear me correctly. Make sure the audio is all working fine. Okay. Well, glad to be. All right.
You are live. You are live. We can hear you.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for allowing me to be part of the Global IT Security E-Conference. It is quite the experience. So with that, thank you for being part of the my topic here is security technology and architecture. I'm Patrick Hamilton, master's in network security and system information security professional certified. I have a number of other certifications that are, well, most people haven't heard of, so that's okay. Anyways, I got about 30 years of experience all the way from game development era as a teenager, although nothing came of that, but gained good experience, even being a system administrator, and then moving into IT infrastructure, engineering, and onward for cybersecurity, full range from governance, providing risk assessments, doing documentations for certification and accreditation, to also the other side of reviewing and auditing those, and then working with blue teams at SOX and incident response. I even have supported U.S. military with information surveillance reconnaissance platforms. And so welcome here as well. So with this is has been explained with the other presentations of this COVID situation, which we're all quite familiarized with. And remote working has become quite accepting now, although it has always existed as telecommuting and road warriors. Finally, it's becoming a reality. Although I think it's still going to take some time, as some places that I've seen as the COVID eases up, such as here in Australia, the ability to come back to offices. But I think as long as remote work is available, who knows? We might be able to get rid of the common cold and the flu while we're at it. Who knows? Maybe that'll work out. So, with that is of how to secure remote working, and there are some ways. One primary use is of software related. And software related is such as in a common form of Centrix or VPNs that are in use. And they're good. It's not to criticize them, but what they are, they're software based and they use a computer to operate. Now, if the computer is a dedicated corporate or government machine, that should be okay. But some companies may have employees use their own personal machines through an encryption system, and that therefore poses a risk, which can be quite interesting to deal with. Let you know I will be looking at the chat and addressing any questions you may have at the end, so feel free to go ahead and pop them in with that. And also there is the problem of threats from phishing attacks, which unfortunately about 30% of everyone who receives a specifically designed email to them will fall for it, whether it's an email attachment or link. And even I got hit by one, and it was a link and it had an O with a little dot on top. And I thought my monitor was dirty and I clicked on it and I fell for it. It does happen to the best of us. Phishing attacks are still there and they do pose a threat. But there are ways to deal with that. Additionally, and with that, cyber attacks from, for example, with the dark trace was showing that they're there. Cyber attacks always are being in the news, and bigger exploits, bigger damaging is always occurring. The recent one is with the supply chain through security vendor SolarWinds, which has impacted other technology and security vendors. So now supply chain has been having to deal with. Now, the way to look at things is that cyber attacks come from now bots to individuals to even countries. And to think that a network will never be broken into is not good thinking, rather than assume the breach will occur, or if not, has happened or is happening. And therefore fight it as a dynamic battle, no longer in a static format. You have the firewall in place and everything is now being protected. Rather, the enemy is coming in, and now how do you push them out? A network breach is not damaging. A network breach is there was an intrusion, but so long as the data was not compromised, it's still okay. As long as the counter is done quickly. And forms of protecting the data were used. Now, if a data breach occurs, that's when bad things do happen, because there's both a direct damage and indirect damage. Direct damage is the cost for a system being down, data to be restored, assuming never pay a ransom, but if the ransom's paid, those would be examples of direct costs from, say, ransomware. Then there's also indirect costs, such as reputation damage, a reputation such as with SolarWinds. Will people have second thoughts of wanting to get a security appliance or system from SolarWinds? That's now in the back of people's mind, especially if it's a financial institution. People may want to take their money and put them elsewhere. So there's a loss of business. And a number of businesses do go bankrupt because of the reputational damage, or try to find ways, change their names, and so on. But there are a number of technical possibilities using the defense in depth principles, which is using layers of defenses, much like an onion, in which you trade time to get to the attacker. And one of these is with cloud-based systems using monitoring for either the service provider or for clients or for both. Typically used by MSPs, managed service security providers. And what they typically can do is they will apply an agent onto the endpoint or the workstation, or a log forwarder that goes to a server. Now, they can go to a cloud server, or it can go to a private server that is co-located, which brings up the question is, what is a cloud server? It's someone else's server, whether it's located elsewhere or who knows where. So with that is some risk has to be applied, which I'll take a side note. If you're using a cloud provider, where is the data stored at? Such as there's this possibility. You have a company that is in your country, the data center is located in another country, and the data can be migrated to a third country. So who has the responsibility of the data if a data breach occurred on the vendor side? And what legal ramifications occur? So when deciding on those, it's a good talk to go about. And a number of providers do provide the ability to keep the data within country in case that's ever required. Another is that I want to bring up is compartmization for operating systems. This is fairly new, although I worked on a system 10 years ago with General Dynamics, in which an operating system is used much like a virtual environment. A virtual environment can have many machines running within one hardware, and a operating system that's compartmentalized acts in the same manner, in which one machine, one physical machine can say run 4 machines, say one for public use, one for personal use, one for business, and maybe a 4th for who knows what. But each of these individual machines or operating systems cannot communicate whatsoever to the other. They're all isolated. So should a personal instance be compromised, the others are not impacted. This can be done through virtualization as well for machines, but the machine has to have that capability to run all those instances. Another is an operating system that could say, compartmize the applications, such as when using a web browser, if the web browser gets compromised, it is destroyed and the operating system remains intact. And I think those will become more popular over time, and I think rather quickly because of this remote work. Now, another one I bring up is what's called SOC in the box, and this is a new trend in which a physical appliance is used for multiple purposes, much like the compartmization for hosts. Because what I have here, I just want to show an example. This is a small form factor server. It's an actual server. It has a Xeon processor, 6 cores that can be hyper because of virtual environment to 12. They can go anywhere from, say, 8 to 512 gig of RAM. I almost said K, 64K, you know, back in the day. And a fairly large amount of hardware or storage. And for a tenth of the price of what a larger servers used to cost for 1 or 2U. So with the miniaturization of technology, which is technology makes things smaller, faster, and cheaper, this then allows security appliances to have many functions run in an environment. So it's best to think of it, I would like to say, as a security environment and no longer an appliance. For example, with standard firewalls, when they've reached their age or their limit, you get rid of it. You really have no more further use for it because it's too slow. It uses like an Atom processor or such and doesn't have much more functionality. But with these small form factor servers, for the essentially a price of a laptop, even sometimes not for a regular office productivity or low-end game machine, they're quite good. And other forms of these machines can be used without the power needed to save for a home system. And with that, because it uses an environment, you can have many functions for it. So although some firewall systems have firewalls and intrusion detection prevention systems, using a virtual environment provides many more benefits. So with that, working in a technical manner of defense in depth, you have the firewall, which is on the outside. Now, with this, they can become adaptive. And adaptive is using a machine learning process capability with threat feeds or behavior analysis that when a certain IP is, say, conducting a port scan, it can blacklist the IP, and that's the end of that until a certain amount of time, and then restore the IP. Or if it receives a threat feed that certain behavior or botnet is attacking, it can close up those domains or IPs, rather than being a static firewall system with static rule sets which have to be adjusted by an administrator. Along with that, second, should firewall be penetrated, there's intrusion detection and prevention systems, which also work both ways. Firewalls do too, but primarily it's for the incoming attacks. On the intrusion prevention side, they are used to monitor behavior in packets or certain protocols to determine certain events or anomalies, if an alert or it should be blocked. And this is becoming more adapted with machine learning to make it much better and more responsive rather than being static and looking for particular signatures. Then further on, we can also introduce sandboxing. Sandboxing is when a file, whether by email attachment or a file transfer, is taken into the security environment, put into a small, say, virtual machine of its own or operating system, and then determines whether or not this file is malicious or if it may even blow the operating system up. And if so, that's the end of it. And if not, it's then delivered. It can take some time depending on the performance. Some are quite fast and some may take some time, but we can also find ways to improve the resources there. Also included can be vulnerability scanners. Nessus is popular. There's also OpenVAST for the open source side, in which a scan can be done of host machines to determine if any vulnerabilities exist. Can even determine if certain machines may be vulnerable to the latest threat feeds that are coming up, as well as provide an inventory of those assets. Now, moving along, there's also with endpoint monitoring, which can either be done through agents, where agents similar to the cloud MSSP are installed but report to the security appliance or their asset appliance environment, or use APIs with other vendor products such as Bitdefender, for example, that can connect with it. And to bring up is with endpoint protection, which is now moving more towards what's called EDR, endpoint detection and response, meaning, say a virus occurs, the system picks it up and then provides an analysis, even the means of forensics to determine where this thing came from and what it did. And with that is the new approach of multi-algorithm defense systems, because attackers are using multi-algorithms for their attacks. And a multi-algorithm attack will defeat a single algorithm system, because if one algorithm doesn't work, try another until one does. So that's always a game that's occurring. And also include with that is forensics. Forensic systems can be applied, such as packet capturing, checking the history where that particular file in conjunction with the EDR, as mentioned before, and can also apply with governance, using dashboards to show how the network is in compliance to, say, NIST or ISO standards, or even kill chains, such as the MITRE ATT&CK matrix, which takes in the principle of tactics, techniques, and procedures of advanced persistent threats. That is, the tactics that state governments use in their attacks. And then we also move into encryption. By having an environment, you can have forms of hardware encryption systems in use, which will help provide, say, a system that's spread out or multiple sites for one company, and to their employees, that the communication is protected by hardware. And since it's protected by hardware, provides this added measure where software, even though it's both use software for their system, hardware is better at performance and can use stronger keys if necessary, or multiple repetitions of encryption, such as double encryption, to protect against metadata, to capture the metadata. This is similar to what the military uses for their applications, and can be managed from a central site or individually. But moving on to that, can also provide to be used for the general internet as a form of security. The disadvantage, though, is every site will need to have such an encryption system, and that establishes a form of trust. The disadvantage to that, along with that, I should say, is that there is no more of being anonymous. Your location or your identity is somehow known, usually by a key or a signature. Although your personal name and information is still secured, you're no longer being hidden behind some wall and no one knows who you or where you're at, because now you have a form of trust provided. But the information is still encrypted. Along with that is with the data, like I said, if a network breach occurs, as long as the data is also encrypted, then the data breach can be minimized. Even if an attacker was able to steal the data, if the data was encrypted, it's still okay, as long, pretty much, if it takes years to crack it. So whenever storing your data at rest, which is being stored and not used, it is encrypted, such as using the operating system's encrypting capability. For Windows, that's BitLocker. Linux operating systems have ability to secure them. Obviously, the best is to secure or to use a hard drive that can secure from the start, but you generally have to enter the passphrase to always when you turn it on. So with that is, I want to bring up threat intelligence and hunting, which I've kind of mentioned earlier before, but now can be made in a form of automation. Threat intelligence and hunting is the ability to bring in threat feeds from government agencies, other companies such as Netflix, and from there get the latest intel. And unfortunately, threat intelligence is usually indicating someone has already been attacked. Hey, this is what you need to do. It's getting to a point of being proactive, but it's still more or less it's happened to someone already. This is what you need to do. And with that, by some systems here, which I'll get to, can monitor your network, identify your machines and systems, and then make a customized report from those feeds to what actions are needed. Obviously, we'd like to get to a point where machine learning, being the buzzword, can do everything on the even system administration side, but that's still a ways to go at this point. Plus, you may not want everything to be changed right away because it may break other systems. Hence, a change control policy is needed still. Then, the wonderful thing that everyone likes to look at is the VIP dashboards, where you see the attack map, you see the countries, and you see these little pews going on. These appliances can do that, can even put in a small window or monitor, or if using an office, at least for the IT or department, can see where any attacks may be occurring. And people can look at a glance. As long as nothing's red, things should be okay. It's something that can be quite offered as well through even using web browsers. And add to that is now want to bring up quantum algorithm resistant integration. Quantum computers will be able to defeat the encryption systems used by conventional computers. Don't exactly know how fast they can do it, but can expect, because a quantum computer kind of think works in 3 dimensions, where a conventional computer only works in 2. That's the lame way to say it, but kind of get it that way. So, however, there is a means to using quantum resistant algorithms on conventional machines to make them resistant to the quantum computers. Now, eventually, the quantum computers can even break these encryption algorithms, but as long as the passphrase or the secret key is being updated frequently, then the quantum system will not be able to defeat it, unless it can determine a pattern that is being used from those changing of the passwords and keys. So one example is to use a whole list of different completely random keys, and then the machine learning capability to sync between all sites of the latest key to use. Now, what I kind of mentioned with the threat system or threat intelligence hunting system is an open source called the Hive, which when used with Cortex and MISP or MISP, provides a great system for incident response and threat hunting, and can be done in a similar automated way to replacing the Tier 1 analyst. The Tier 1 analyst role is generally identify an event within 5 minutes if it's a true event or is a false positive and can be removed. This is being replaced now with machine learning automation in most SOCs, or practically almost, I think, all SOCs now. And this can also be done for these small servers. So that's one example there. Now, they might not be too much for an individual at home, but there are means to further reduce it, and I will say that's the trend that's going to be happening. All right, so along with that is MSSPs, managed service security providers, are likely to continue to grow and provide active monitoring to clients as cybersecurity becomes more accepting because of the remote access and the threats and the damages that keep arising. The cost is also likely to go down. Again, with machine learning, MSSPs will be using that to filter out the traffic, which allows them to get in more customers with the same number of employees, and therefore reduce the cost. But what I think is also going to happen is when using boxes, especially small little boxes in offices or say in the front lines, is a licensing program. And so that's more the business side, and similar to licensing cars, that you license a car, then you decide to buy it or trade in. But instead of paying for a new one, I would believe that a tech refresh will occur with a new appliance without further costs, and the old appliance is returned. And the good thing about the old appliances, they can be recycled for other purposes, whether recycled for resources or other capabilities or given to charities such as the schools for education purposes. So they have a future life even if they're out of date. And with the licensing program, therefore, it provides continued cybersecurity for any organization. With using an environment, the updates can be continuously done until eventually the hardware is become obsolete. So, still got some time here, in which I want to bring this up. In the first step of this whole process, and although it's not technical in nature, is the performing a risk assessment. And there's a good program here, open source. If anyone's not familiar with risk assessments or budget constraining, such as don't want to pay thousands to $10,000 for a consultant to do a risk assessment, there's a good program for it to provide businesses their own form of risk assessments. It is called the Cybersecurity Evaluation Tool, CSET, provided by U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Again, it doesn't report anything to the U.S. government. It's all kept local. And is used to provide increased cybersecurity maturity. The good thing about this is it doesn't, I should take that back. Depending on the standard they're used, and there's many standards available, such as the C2M2 Cybersecurity Capability Maturity Model, which is NIST-based using the US standards, is not technical in nature. It is more for non-technical, business-oriented people to answer questions and perform the assessment. As opposed to saying the cybersecurity risk framework is very technical and can take quite a long time to go through with it. But this model, and it makes it easier. And the good thing is it uses NIST controls, so you can map it to other standards if you need to. And the other two things is that it uses a network diagram system that is free with it, and which I will show. And afterwards provides an asset inventory. Afterwards gives you good reports and provides a cybersecurity plan as a base plate should a company not have one. And the good thing is that it runs on Windows and it's a database system, not using spreadsheets and anything like that. It's a good system. So I'll put the link in the chat too afterwards. So I'm going to see if I can do this right to bring that over. Let me see. Here we go. All right, so there we go. So this is, now I gotta control it myself. Yeah, I love technology, right? Okay. All right, so this is an example of the CSET. And this was one that I started, but I'm going to just start a new one. And so you conduct a new assessment, the date, the facility name or company, as well as contacts, can add in more, and then the sector, such as financial services, and then the value of the network and how long the assessment may take. And then click on next. And then this is done through three possibilities of either doing by oneself to determine based on experience the requirements, such as for confidentiality, how protected must this information be, integrity, how perfect this information must be for someone to read or to obtain that it has not been altered, and availability, the uptime. So like a public website, confidentiality would be low, integrity, if it's by the government, you probably want high to avoid misinformation or fake news. And availability probably doesn't need to be high. If it's just general information, probably can be a little moderate. But emergency broadcast system would be high. A financial institution's going to have high on everything. Or you can use the general risk base using sliders to determine the value. And or using, in this case, NIST 60 or FIPS to go about it. But generally, using one's judgment generally works. So we're going to say if it's a financial institution, it's pretty much going to always be high. And then there are the standards here. All these are here. Unfortunately, it does not have ISO standards, but ISOs can be mapped from the NIST if needed. And the one I recommend using is right here, the Cyber Capability Maturity Model. But like there are others. There's health and supply chain, which is now a big item. And click on next. And here we got a network diagram. So this is one nice feature I want to show you. There are beginning templates here, or you can create your own, but I'll just start one here with the medical. And this is a network diagram. And the good thing is, like this, you can drag it. The lines move. If you have a zone, the whole thing moves. And you can always connect to others. So it's a nice feature to have, and they got good icons. You can always import other icons if needed. And you can also do exports as a number of capabilities. And again, this is free. After that, you can do an inventory, which can be provided to a spreadsheet. So all those systems can go into a spreadsheet. And if you want to use spreadsheets in email, you can, but you now have inventory, asset inventory right there without recreating that. Then going on next. And here's what's all the questions as well. Now, this has about like 300 questions. And they come in the form of questions or requirements. Questions are fairly easy to use because they're in the form of a question, like this one here, or documented practices followed to establish and maintain identities and access control. And that's either yes, no, not applicable, or there's an alternative solution. And here there are references available. And there's a place for adding in document. There it is, references. In case you want further information, you can review that. And or if you prefer the requirements way, you only need to do one or the other. You don't need to do both. In which case, they're just a statement. Like, there is a documented cybersecurity risk management strategy. Yes, no, and so forth. And from here, you'll get your baseline. After this is completed, which is going to have a very bad result after this, you have a dashboard, which will then provide all the results. And since I didn't do anything, they're quite bad. But the good thing is you have reports here. And you have what is called the site cybersecurity plan. And you can, of course, change the template and the logos to meet your organizational standard. But if you need to come up with a cybersecurity plan and you don't know where to start, or you don't want to spend the time to type one up, it has it all available here. Unfortunately, the network diagram is tilted, but it has roles and responsibilities, the CISO, and so forth that helps to save time. And with that, I will end that item there, and I will post that in the chat here. So let me, otherwise that is bring it to a conclusion. If you have any questions, go ahead and please send them my way.
Thank you so much.
Glad to have been part of this, and I hope you learned some things, or at least take the cybersecurity evaluation plan and perform an assessment. Or if you have your own system and so forth, that's great. Go ahead, and this is your first step to determine what levels of cybersecurity you would need. Do you really need a SOC in a box? Do you already have something in play? This is the first step to know. All right.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for such a wonderful presentation, such an insightful presentation. The things that you have shared for us is definitely worth for in the professional career of our attendees. Thank you so much. It's an honor for us that you have given time to us for such a phenomenal presentation. So I will request my audience if they do have any question regarding the presentation, kindly do ask him in the main chat. And Patrick is here to answer your all questions. Now we will be moving towards our next presentation with Aman Sharma, who is working as co-founder and CEO of the Trimwood. So we will be joining you within few minutes with Aman Sharma. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.